Hey y'all! Well, I wanted to give y'all a subjective review of the speakers that we looked at earlier. We did some unboxing videos. You know, I've been using these RP600Ms for a long time, and I tried the version 2s, and I just didn't really care for their presentation. And we've got the Fyne Audio F500, and then we've got the Quad S2. And as you can see, they're kind of a variety of sizes. This is actually the biggest one of the lot. This is our little small guy. Different size drivers. I mean, these two are similar. This is a coaxial unit. And the difficulty that I'm having is this isn't an objective review. And I'm not going to go out and buy one of those Kipple near-field measuring things like Aaron's Audio Corner or Amir uses. And so if you're looking for measurements, we're not doing that. And even trying to measure them in room with one of the little Rue microphones and that software really isn't going to tell you anything except like what my room is doing, which is far from ideal. And this is not in a treated room. This is just in my living room. And so, yeah, take all this with a grain of salt. So the main thing that I'm finding, and it was actually very surprising, that it's not really the frequency response that I think I'm hearing in the difference of these speakers. Like people say these are like super bright speakers, and I'm not hearing that they're hugely different from these two, although this one's probably the mellowest of the bunch as far as the top end goes, but it's still detailed. And I know Aaron's talked about this before, that some speakers that are bright are perceived as being more detailed, whereas this speaker's definitely hotter or brighter on the top end. This one's got way more detail. And what I think I'm seeing, and hopefully this analogy will be understood by some of you folks that have done photography or have been into that realm, how camera lenses have their own rendering. And like some camera lenses are warmer, some of them are cooler, but that doesn't have anything to do with like the contrast or the sharpness or the detail and the micro contrast and all those things, the 3D pop and that kind of stuff that we see in camera lenses. I'm starting to see the same thing with speakers, and it's difficult to come up with the words to describe what I'm hearing. And the main thing that jumped out to me when I went from this RP600M, and I've tried several other speakers at this price point. I tried some Triangle, Borea 3s, I think they were, and then I've tried some, DIY different speakers. Those DIY 2.1s were nice speakers, but I still liked the way these sounded better. And nothing really jumped out as being a big improvement over what I was hearing from these RP600Ms until I hooked these F500s up. These were the first ones to come of this batch here, of this pair. And immediately when I plugged these in, I heard a much more delicate kind of sound coming from them. And there was less smearing. And I think that's what I'm hearing with these RP600Ms. And I'm not talking about like the frequency response. It's almost the quiet between the notes. It's really hard to describe, but it's the details in the music and the subtleties are easier to hear with these speakers, and like I said, it's not the tonality of them. They both have really good bass. And these speakers do have a kind of a three-dimensional bass that seems to radiate through the room, which likely has to do with the way it uses this down-facing port with a 360-degree bass, and the way I have the speakers set in my bay window area that reflects the bass back out into the room. And I've tried setting up my room several different ways. I've moved the furniture all to one end and put the speakers in the corner. I've put them on the wall. I pull them out from the wall. And I prefer the way it sounds when I have the speakers and my stereo set up in the bay window. It really seems to give this kind of a clamshell, radiating the sound into the room, and you hear less of the speaker and more of just like a wall of sound. And I'm sure sound engineers are shaking their head going, that's like the worst place to put a speaker. Hey, we all have our personal taste. So, back to these speakers. These were definitely a huge step up from these RP600Ms. And they do have the factory crossovers in them. And I know watching Danny at GR Research, I know he's got a crossover upgrade to these. And one of the things that he was talking about was the iron core inductor versus a air core. And that how an iron core inductor is slower. And I'm not sure if that's what I'm hearing with those RP600M speakers. And I am looking to do the crossover upgrade. And yeah, we'll go into that in a future video and see what like iron core versus air core inductors do. I know we changed one of the capacitors in that speaker and it helped, but it's not even close to the level of clarity that this has. And it's almost like, again, I keep going back to photography because that's really what I studied for decades, is if you're in Photoshop, there's like this little clarity slider, and it doesn't change the contrast of the whole image. It does like micro contrast, or the separation of, like in a speaker, like the note to the quiet on each side of it. So these little quad S2s, and I was a little concerned that it has such a small driver compared to these other speakers, and I was worried that this ribbon tweeter was going to be super hot and just fatiguing, and like the bass port in the back of it's this big around. It's got like a 1-inch bass port. I'm thinking this speaker's not going to have any bass, or but the specs showed it going down as low as like these speakers do, and so I'm thinking, yeah, maybe somehow it does, and somehow it does. It's got really nice, smooth bass. But what this speaker brings to the table is the difference between these two speakers and perceived detail or clarity, especially like the air around the notes, especially on the top end kind of, the top end sparkle, I call it, when I'm tuning amps. This speaker is incredible. It's like the difference between these two is like a jump up from this speaker to this speaker. And I mean, don't get me wrong, these speakers sound really good. And the advantage that this would have over this is this Fyne Audio being a coaxial speaker. As you move around the room, the sound doesn't change. And you don't hear like the frequency response off axis changing like it does with this. This speaker is very sensitive to where you're sitting in the room and how they're towed in or out and that sort of thing. And I'm not sure you'd be able to get a pair of these speakers to give everybody in the room the same listening experience that this speaker does. So if you got multiple people in the room, you might have to give up a little bit of the clarity or the air that this speaker has to get it even across the room. And it seems like especially the vertical change is almost more so than the horizontal, if that makes sense. So, after listening to all of these, especially these two guys, and I've been going back and forth with different kinds of music. I've tried like jazz, I've tried, Eva Cassidy and these other soprano singers, Natalie Merchant, tried, male vocals, I've tried, some rock music. And I will say that for rock type of music, I almost like this presentation a little better. But for everything else, and especially like classical music, these are just almost otherworldly sounding. I don't know why more people don't talk about these speakers. There's like no reviews on the internet, or very few, and most of the people, they're using them in the wrong use case. They're trying to use these in a giant room 3 feet off from the wall and talking about how they don't have any bass. And like one guy actually did say, yeah, I was using them wrong. I moved them back closer to the wall and the bass just, bloomed out of them. And so you do have to be careful with room positioning with these. And it could be just, in my case, these are just ideal. But guys, I love these speakers. So, yeah, I don't know if this is helpful to folks. People have been asking me, hey, want to hear your opinions about this? And again, I'm not going to go spend $100,000 or whatever that, those Kippel near field testing equipment and all that says. There's other people doing that. And, I'm good with testing tube gear and showing you that kind of analysis. But on these speakers, which is a very important part of the system, I'm going to just pretty much do like subjective kind of reviews. And again, what I'm talking about is hard to describe. And I know I keep going back to this photography analogy, but it's like what makes a Zeiss lens so good. And that people that don't want to spend Zeiss money on camera lenses say there's nothing there. It's the same way with Leica glass. People that don't want to buy Leica glass, it's like, oh, there's nothing there. See how they measure, look at the frequency response and all that. And it's beyond measuring. And you can look at these frequency response curves all day long, and you'll never see the difference in what these two speakers sound like. So, after hearing this S2, I'm really even more excited for my Deckware, God, I can't remember the number, something 945. Anyway, they're ribbon tweeter 8-inch woofer. So it's got a much bigger woofer than this. The cabinet's not a whole lot larger than this. It's one of the smallest cabinets with an 8-inch woofer, that anybody's making. And the interesting thing is it has no crossover. The woofers, or the mid woofers, connected directly to the speaker jacks, and it's just got one cap on the tweeter to, protect it from the low frequencies. And so I'm hoping that it has this transparency, maybe that's the word that I'm looking for, that this Quad S2 has. But there's some magic going on with this little speaker. And like I said, I'm stunned that there's not more people talking about it. So, I've got 2 more speakers headed my way to review. One of them is an Fyne Audio Versus V8B. And then they're also sending me their little external RST super tweeter that you set on top of your existing speaker. And that might be interesting to see what that does paired with the RP600M. Like I said, I'm also going to put together a crossover upgrade for this speaker that's going to have air core inductors, different caps and stuff, and see if that shifts it towards what I'm hearing here, I'm not sure I'll ever get here, but if I can get this to sound closer to this, that would be a fun thing to experiment with. And I know you've seen some of my other DIY speaker stuff, especially like toying around with that three-way, and I just realized that me trying to understand and get into this whole dynamics of designing speakers is way outside of my skill set. And I'm going to let people that understand that black magic deal with that. But I do have a prescription that is known to work with this speaker that I'm going to try. So again, I don't know why or what makes this little speaker sound the way it does, but it's freaking amazing. And I don't know if they've still got any more of them. It was on almost half price closeout. I got this speaker, this pair for like $800, which is a steal. So if you're looking for some bookshelf speakers, especially the smaller size, that's going to sound bigger than these and have just crazy good transparency. I mean, it took classical music to a level I've never heard before. I mean, I could hear the individual voices in the choir. I mean, it's spooky. And anyway, oh yeah, I forgot to say, the second speaker that I've got coming is an Ascend Acoustics Sierra 1 V2. And for full disclosure, the Aspiron, they're sending me that as a demo. And Ascend Acoustics, and I don't blame them, said they've been scammed by people claiming to be YouTube reviewers. So they asked me to pay for them up front. And then after I do the review and send them back, they'll give me my money back. And so that's a nice thing that I know I'm not like on the hook for buying those speakers if I don't like them. And who knows, they may be better than these. The little Deckware guys are getting built. I put the deposit on them. And the prices on these, the Fyne Audio is about a $1,400 pair of speakers. The Ascend Acoustics right at $1,000, and this is the version 2. And then the Deckware speakers are, I think, $1,400 plus shipping, so they're another $1,500 pair of speakers. And these were $1,500, and these were $1,500. And again, I just got a really good deal on these. And in fairness, these little clip speakers, I think they retailed for $600, so it was less than half of what these were. And you can find these on sale regularly for $350. And so for people on a budget at that $350, $400 price point, I still think these are just really hard to beat. And don't want to take anything away from them, but I'm found that there is magic in what these things do, and there's this transparency that I was actually shocked that I heard. And like I said, it's really hard to describe, but when you hear it, you'll agree that it's like, whoa. I mean, it's almost like that. I mean, I hate that term, the blackness, but there's almost like this blackness between the music and the high end is just kind of floating above it. It's back to the stuff that you just can't measure. And I do feel that this is going to help listening to different products to be able to really hear things that I couldn't hear with these speakers. And things like speaker cables and stuff may now come in more into play than they did with these speakers. But even with these, I could hear a little difference in changing some cables. So we'll get into that in a future video, talk about that issue. And the interesting thing too is I don't feel like that I need to change the voicing of the amp to work with these different speakers, because the voicing of the amp is more about the frequency response and where the amp, how level that is, which is different from the speakers that bring this whole different kind of clarity thing to the party. And I knew that there was something here when I first started critically listening with headphones. I was hearing stuff that's like, hey, what's that? My speakers don't sound like that. These speakers do. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little quasi-subjective review. If you can find a pair of these speakers, they work great with tube amps. I'm listening to them with my EL34 and my 300B amp, and they sound fantastic. They plenty of volume, plenty of bass. I don't feel a need for a subwoofer. Fortunately, Music Direct, I think, is where I got these. I'll put up here if it's different. They were on closeout. And I'll put the link below. And all they have were these cherry finish ones that are kind of this satin kind of cherry. It's got wood grain, but it's really subtle kind of wood grain. It's a beautiful speaker. And the construction is just beautiful. I don't know if they're continuing to make these. When I look at Quad's website, they're not showing these as a discontinued model or anything. So maybe they're just not selling them in the U.S. because nobody knows about them. And so maybe ask your dealer, hey, can you get me some Quads? And maybe they'll get popular here because these are worth people buying. These are amazing. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters, especially new folks. Really appreciate you joining in. Thanks to all you folks that are regular viewers and subscribers. I really appreciate it. We passed 15K subs, which is amazing. And we'll be doing more speaker reviews after these Aspiron Audio and Ascend Acoustics speakers get there and see if they can knock the Quad S2 off its throne. And until then, have a nice day.